Hello MegaSage007, my name is Derived Energy, you can call me DE, and this evening I'll be making a video response to your video, Atheists Are Brainwashed, It's a Hoax. I'm going to play your video and then respond accordingly.
We point out there is nothing seen or unseen in all of the universe that is not supremely intelligently designed, and atheists say, duh, what design? And they'll say, are you confusing order and complexity with design? No, we're not. God has infinite understanding, and of course there is going to be order and complexity in the supremely intelligently designed universe. They go together.
Okay, well my first issue is with this idea of complexity in the universe. Let's take stars for example, since there are literally billions of them in our visible universe. Stars are just almost exclusively made of hydrogen and helium, and inside the interior of stars, hydrogen atoms combine to synthesize helium in a fusion reaction, much like that in a hydrogen bomb. So I don't think this is an incredibly complicated process, since ape-like beings, the supposed guardians of the Earth, are able to create fusion bombs that evoke the same kinds of processes that are going on inside the interior of stars. So this certainly isn't a complex phenomenon, I would argue, and not at all evidence for some supremely intelligently designed phenomenon. And I mean, if we look in the scientific, the periodic table, there are only about 118 elements, I think it is, 118. I mean, that's a number that you could use to denote somebody with above average intelligence, but it's certainly not an incredibly complicated kind of amount of elements in the universe. And the same with the four main forces in the universe. You've got the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and gravity. Just four forces. I mean, in the game of chess, there are 6 pieces. Mankind, or somebody, or some group of people, conceived of the game of chess, in which there are the 6 pieces: the knight, the rook, the bishop, the queen, the king, and the pawn. So there are more different types of pieces on a chessboard than there are fundamental forces that govern everything that we see. So I don't buy into this argument that the universe is supremely intelligently designed, as you put it, because the universe, by and large, is very simple and basic. The whole mechanics of it. I mean, it's just empty space, and very, 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 very occasionally, great big balls of hydrogen and helium. I mean, the only complexity we see in actuality, is life on this planet, and especially the human mind. But even the human mind isn't incredibly complex. I mean, not to the extent that I would describe a creator to explain the complexity of the human brain. I mean, the human brain, it's an impressive piece of kit, but at the end of the day, it's kind of limited. I mean, take the short-term memory capacity of humans to start with. I mean, we can only store and manipulate between 5 and 9 units of information in our brain at any one given time. So, our brains are pretty limited, as you would expect them to be, given that they are just survival tools, tools to solve problems that are imposed upon us by our compulsive need to survive. So I don't see this complexity in the universe by and large. Just on planet Earth, where there's life, but this is not typical of the universe. I mean, there's the selection bias, observer selection bias. We just happen to be in possession of a brain that is complicated compared to stars, for example, and therefore we can ask questions about the universe and think, uh, why do we have such complicated brains? This must be the work of some omniscient, omnipotent being. But you know, by and large, the universe as a whole is pretty basic. So I reject your complexity argument.
Then tell me how the laws of the universe got their unique powers and their mathematical constants, and who set them? You realize what would happen if gravity's mathematical constant was changed? The whole universe might collapse into crashing planets and stars.
Many Christian theists claim that if the expansion rate of the universe was larger, there would be no galaxy formation, and if smaller, the universe would collapse prior to star formation. This is also the parameter that apologist William Lane Craig referred to when he lifted out of context a quotation from Stephen Hawking's bestseller, A Brief History of Time, which also bears repeating. If the rate of expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have collapsed before it ever reached its present size. Craig ignored the explanation Stephen Hawking gave 7 pages later for why no fine-tuning was needed. The rate of expansion of the universe would automatically become very close to the critical rate determined by the energy density of the universe. This could then explain why the rate of expansion is still so close to the critical rate without having to assume that the initial rate of expansion of the universe was very carefully chosen. Conclusion: no fine-tuning. The parameter is fixed by established physics and cosmology.
Atheists reply the laws of nature have always been. So they say there's no need for a God.
Well, I didn't realize that there had been a consensus amongst the scientific atheistic community as to whether the universe is temporally finite or infinite. And in any case, I think the question of whether the universe is temporally finite or infinite is irrelevant to the question of whether there is a God or not, because sentience can only be either a negative liability or neutral due to the following equation. So that equation argues against the existence of God, because if there was a God, why would he bother and continue existing? Sentience is fundamentally useless, and any act of creation on his part to create suffering animals is an insane and sadistic act. This would not be the behavior of an omnibenevolent God. It would be the act of a demiurge, an evil, insane, twisted God. So, yes, that kills the God argument.
Atheists go back into history and blame all of the problems of the past on believers rather than on sinful unbelievers like themselves. And then they say it'll be a better world without us.
Well, I think it'd be a better world without either theists or atheists on this planet. The ideal population of animals on Earth is zero, in my opinion.
And then they say it'll be a better world without us. And yet when atheists are in power, millions of believers were buried and turned into worm food, and many atheists along with them became worm food. Because, you see, there is no moral code with atheism. So there comes a day when it gets down to you and the other guy, one atheist versus another, neither one of them has a moral code, and it's kill or be killed. How do you like that?
You're quite right, of course. Without a God, there's no objective morality, and that's why I describe myself as a sentient, self-reflexive manifestation of energy/matter in an amoral and meaningless universe. And it's a very precarious position to be in. And there's no moral code, there's no right and wrong. Any moral morality are value judgments inherently. You can't derive an ought to from an is, and therefore people can conduct themselves in any way they see fit, and that's why we live in such a troubled and problematic world. And it's another reason why I strongly advocate not creating more children on this planet.
But the atheist says we're free thinkers. Oh, really? Then why are you studying the atheist mindset? So that every time I talk to an atheist, and I have talked to many atheists, they all sound the same. Like tape recorders.
Ta-da!